Hi, in today's video, we are going to discuss the question taken from an IB question paper. This is the question paper code. So from this question paper, we shall be discussing the first question. Please pause the video and read the question. The question says that ethine, which is C2H2, reacts with oxygen in welding torches. So we are supposed to write the equation for complete combustion of ethine. Ethine is an alkyne, so it will have a triple bond, C triple bond C. Now there are two hydrogens. One will be connected to this carbon, another one will be connected to this carbon. So obviously ethine is C2H2. So now C2H2 reacts with, when we are saying complete combustion, it means that there is sufficient supply of oxygen so that the complete carbon hydrogen bonds are broken. Carbon gets converted to carbon dioxide, hydrogen gets converted to water molecule. So when we balance this equation, here there are two oxygens, here there is only one oxygen. So 2 plus 1 is 3, and out here there are two oxygens. So oxygen is not balanced. Coming to carbon, that is also not balanced. Here it is 2, but here there is 1. Hydrogen, of course, it is balanced. So in this reaction, carbon and oxygen needs to be balanced, but always keep in mind, whenever a reaction related to combustion is being balanced out, first balance out the carbon atoms, then hydrogen, and only at the end, oxygen has to be balanced out. So here there is 2 carbon. In order to make this 2, put a 2 in front. So now carbon is balanced. Since hydrogen is already balanced, we need not have to worry about it. Now, last step is to balance out oxygen. 2 times 2 is 4, and here there is 1. So that means this side there is 4 plus 1, which is 5. So here it would be 5 by 2. Either you can leave it as 5 by 2, or you can multiply throughout and write it like 2C2H2 reacts with 5O2, giving 2 times 2 is 4 CO2 and 2 water molecules. See, this is the marking scheme. Here they have taken it as 5 by 2. Instead of 5 by 2, it is put as 2.5. And here this is after multiplying throughout by 2. So that's how they are getting the same equation what we have got. So let's move on to the next question. Deduce the Lewis dot structure of ethine. In order to draw the Lewis dot structure for ethine, it is C2H2. So there are two carbon atoms, carbon 1, carbon 2. Now let's see what is the electronic configuration of carbon. Carbon has an electronic configuration of 1s2, 2s2, 2p2, meaning 2s2, 2p2 together is having 4 valence electron. Carbon is atomic number 6. So 1s2, 2s2, 2p2. This together has 4 valence electrons. So that will be, I'm putting it around this carbon. Same thing happens for the next carbon as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now coming to hydrogen, it is atomic number 1. So it is 1s1. So 2 hydrogens only are there. So let me put hydrogen number 1 with 1 of its electron. Hydrogen number 2 with 1 of its electron. Now if you're analyzing, there are no more atoms to be filled up. Hydrogen has got its nearest noble gas configuration, which is that of helium. It's got a duplet configuration, but for carbon, it hasn't received its nearest noble gas configuration, or its carbon hasn't received octet configuration. So what we can do is we can assign a double bond using these 2 electrons, and now the third bond with these 2 electrons. So ultimately, carbon will receive a triple bond. So I'm just erasing this off. I'm just erasing this off and making it as a bond. I've erased 2 electrons and I'm putting it as a bond between the 2 atoms. Now, this carbon 2 here, 6 here has attained octet configuration. Same for the next carbon as well. So this is the Lewis dot. This is the Lewis dot structure for ethyne. Now let's move on to the third question. Compare giving a reason the length of the bond between carbon atoms in ethyne with that of ethane. Ethyne is C triple bond C, hydrogen on either sides. Ethane is C single bond C with hydrogens on either sides. With hydrogens on either sides. So here, between the carbon atoms, there are greater number of bonds than here. This is the reason why ethyne is having a shorter bond length than ethane. So we can write that ethyne has shorter bond length because of more number of bonding electrons, bonds between the carbon atoms. Between the carbon atoms. Okay, so let's see what is given in the marking scheme. Ethane is shorter, it has greater number of bonding electrons. Okay, so or you can even write that because there are more number of bonded pair of electrons, it will be having a stronger attraction between the carbon atoms, so they come further closer to each other. Anything is fine. So let's move on to the next question. Identify the type of interaction that must be overcome when liquid ethyne vaporizes. Ethyne is actually a molecule which is linear. So linear molecules are non-polar. These molecules are non-polar. This molecule is a non-polar. Having no polarity, it will have weakest attraction. So ethyne, when it is getting vaporized, it will be overcoming weak van der Waals forces of attraction. Ethyne is a non-polar and has to overcomes London dispersion forces. London dispersion forces while it is vaporized. So I'll show you the marking scheme. So here we have the marking scheme. You can write a London dispersion, which is an instantaneously formed attractive force, or you can say that it is an instantaneously formed dipole, which will be creating an induced dipole on its neighbor. So either you can say London dispersion force, or you can say instantaneous dipole, induced dipole. If you're using instantaneous dipole, you have to use the word induced dipole also, because one molecule, when it is getting an instantaneous dipole, when one molecule gets an instantaneous dipole, it will result in causing a polarity in its neighboring molecule also. So that's the reason why if you're using the word instantaneous dipole, use it along with induced dipole. It has to be used together. So going back to the next question. Here we have the next question. Ethane reacts with steam. Ethane is reacting with steam and you are getting two possible isomers. Isomers will be having the same molecular formula, but structure wise they will be different. And you can see here 2 carbon atoms, 2 plus 2 4 hydrogens, 3 plus 1 4 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. So these are isomers. Now they are asking what is the name of the product B applying IUPAC rules. So I'll show you that. Let me redraw B as CH3CHO. So here we are having an aldehydic functional group, and here we are having a CS3 group. So 2 carbon atoms only is there, and an aldehyde. Aldehyde is represented as Al, and 2 carbon atoms is represented as Eth. There is no carbon-carbon double bond, so it's an ethane. So you might be wondering, we have to write it as ethane, and this joint here, no, it is not right. Just because there are 2 vowels coming close together, the first vowel has to be dropped down. I'll repeat. When we have 2 vowels coming close together, the first vowel has to be dropped down. So the name is Eth and Al. Hope that's clear to you. So now let's see the marking scheme. See ethanol. Going to the next question. This question involves a lot of calculation. Okay, so now let's see how to do this question. Determine the enthalpy change for the reaction in kilojoules to produce A using section 11 of the data booklet. Let me rewrite what is compound A. Compound A is CH2 double bond CHOH. This is compound 2. So now in order to determine the enthalpy change for the reaction, we should be knowing what is the reactant, what is the product involved in this particular reaction, and this is the reaction which is required. It is for this reaction we are asked to calculate the enthalpy change. So what is to be done is, the reactant is ethyne, then water is there, the product A, compound A is there. In order to calculate the enthalpy change, we will expand and write the reactants as well as products so that the calculation becomes easy. So ethyne is C triple bond C, hydrogen, hydrogen. Water molecule is this, and compound A is what we require here. It is CH, double bond C, hydrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. This is compound A. Now let's see what is the enthalpy values for each of these bonds. So here we have the values in the data booklet. Please keep in mind, we have to depend on bond enthalpy, average bond enthalpy table, not any other table. And in fact, it is clearly stated. Here we have table 11 as mentioned in the question. So let's see what all data we require. We need C triple bond C. We need CH data. We need OH data. Then this is again repeated, CH data, C double bond C data, CO data, and OH data. So going back to the table, C double bond C. Here we have C double bond C. Then the remaining are all, no, sorry, this is C double bond C. Then there is C triple bond C also. So we need these 2 data for multiple bonds. And for the single bond, we have to depend here. CO is 358, CH is 414, and then we have OH bond, which is 463. So we need this data to do the calculation. So back to the question. CH is, I'll use another color to highlight it. So CH bond energy value, what we have got is 414. So here also it's 414. This is 414. This is 414. This is also 414. So in this part, we have 414 times 2. Here we have 414 times 3. Then we have C triple bond C. So this is CH bond data. Then we have C triple bond C. So C triple bond C is 839. 839. So 839. Then we have OH bond, which is 463. This is 463. This is also 463. So here we have 463 times 2. This is for the OH bond. Now coming to this side, we have CO bond, which is nothing but 358, 358. So this was CH bond. Now 358 is for CO bond. Then we have an OH bond at 463. So again, this is 463 for the OH bond. Be careful when we are using bond enthalpy data to calculate the enthalpy of a reaction. It is always energy of the reactants minus energy of the products. I'm highlighting it as reactants first followed by products. This is only when we are depending on bond enthalpy data. So this will be equal to reactants is thus. So that would be 414 times 2 plus 839. So we have written the values for ethyne. Then we have, now we have water molecule. So that would be plus 2 times 463. Coming to the product side, so this has to be added and further subtracted from the product data. So here it is 414 times 3 plus 358 plus 463. So when we add up these data, we will be getting it as 2593. This is the energy value for the reactants, minus this side would be 2677. And when I'm further calculating this, I'll end up with minus 84. Now, the unit is kilojoules per mole. And being a combustion reaction, it's an exothermic reaction. So the value minus 84 is, so it's having the value negative. It's minus 84 because it is an exothermic reaction. The enthalpy change for the reaction to product B is minus 213. Here we had got that the enthalpy change for the reaction is minus 84 kilojoules. For this reaction, we have got this as minus 84 kilojoules, and for product B, it is said that it is minus 213. Now, predict a reason giving reason which product is more stable. Now, in order to understand which is the more stable product, we will have to depend on the energy profile diagrams. So let's see that. So now let's try that. So here we have compound A, its energy profile diagram. Let's assume that this is the reactant, which is ethyne. So reactant is ethyne, CH2, double bond CH2. This is ethyne. Its energy profile diagram would be, it goes up for activation energy and comes down. And just because 84 kilojoules is released, this spacing, this gap between the reactants and the products is going to be lower. It is minus 84. It's small. It's going to be a small gap. For compound B, the starting reactant is the same. So that means that the reactant energy now remains the same. It does not change. I'll repeat. We are starting off the reaction to get compound A or B from ethyne. That is the basic reason why this energy level for the reactant, it's the same. But in order to form the compound, after the formation of the compound, its energy is going down to a lower level, and the gap widens out. It's minus 213 kilojoules. The gap is broader. So here we can see that A is coming down. The product A, for product A, the gap, the energy level is comparatively higher. I mean, this energy level is higher than this energy level. I'll repeat. The energy level for the product A is higher than the energy level for product B. Obviously, since B has released off when the when compound B was formed, since more amount of energy has been released off, B is more stable than A. I'll repeat again. When B was formed, greater amount of energy was released and hence B is more stable than A. Which is more stable? So stable is B. B is because it is more exothermic. More exothermic. B released off more amount of energy and hence it is more stable. Or B has a lower energy level than A. This is the answer key. B, it is more negative or it's lower and its enthalpy is lower, its potential energy is lower. Any wordings can be used. It's more exothermic. So that's what we have mentioned there. I'll repeat. B is releasing of a greater extent of energy. It's more exothermic. The word would be more exothermic. Now, let's move on to the next question. The IR spectrum and low resolution H1 NMR spectrum of the actual product formed are shown below. So the first diagram, this diagram, what we see here is the IR spectrum. It's already indicated in the diagram itself. The thing is, in an IR spectrum, the graph will be, the curve will be from the top and it will start from the right side and it will be moving towards the left. Now, one thing you have to note in IR spectrum is that one thing we have to note in the IR spectrum is that the region beyond 1500, this is 1500, beyond this region, in this region, this is known as the fingerprint region. Fingerprint region. Now, the uniqueness of this region is that just like each and every individual has a unique fingerprint for our palms, each and every individual has a unique fingerprint that would match with none others. Likewise, when we say that each and every molecule will have its own unique graph, the graph for one compound will never match with the graph for another compound, even if the functional groups remain the same. So in our question also, in order to identify which is the actual product, we can depend on IR spectrum to know the functional groups that are present. Based on the peaks that we get in the IR spectrum, we can come to the conclusion regarding which all functional groups are present in the actual compound. Though A and B are possible isomers, only one is the major product, and in order to identify that, we are depending on this IR spectrum. So here we can see that this is 1700 and obviously this is 1800. Beyond 1700, approximately very close to 1750, we have a very strong peak. This peak usually refers to carbonyl. And this is somewhere around 2700 and this is somewhere around 2900. So between 2700 and 2900 also we are having a very strong peak. So our aim is to identify which functional group in the molecule is giving rise to these two peaks. If we are able to identify that, we will be able to identify the functional groups present in the actual product that is being formed, and from that we will be able to have a conclusion, partial conclusion, regarding whether A is the product or B is the product. Now let's try to find out which functional group the peaks in the graph corresponds to? There was a peak at 1750. There was a peak at somewhere around 1750. If you're cross-checking it with the table, here you can see a peak around 1750. It is due to carbonyl group, which could be an aldehyde, which could be a ketone, a carboxylic acid, or an ester. So we have these options corresponding to peak at 1700 and 1750. Then we had a peak somewhere around 2700 to 2900. In this range, between this range, we had another strong peak. In this wavelength list, we have a data which corresponds to, which is in the range 2850 to 3090. So, and this range is for the CH bond. The CH bond, it could be because of an alkane, alkene, or an arene. Let it be any carbon chain, let it be irrespective of which carbon chain it is, a CH bond will be giving rise to a peak around 2700 and 2900. In both our molecules, we have a CH bond. We have the CH bond which is connected to a C double bond C as well as a C single bond C. So this could be because of this particular functional group. Sorry, this particular bond. The CH bond would be most likely to give rise to 2700, 2900 peak. Now going back to the molecule, let's analyze it thoroughly. In molecule B, we have CH bond data as well as carbonyl bond data, or the 1750 could be corresponding to the C double bond O, and the 2701 would be corresponding to the 2700 to 2900 range would be corresponding to the CH bond. Now let's thoroughly analyze this molecule. Okay, so the 2700, 2900 can be attributed to this particular CH bond. So now analyzing the next functional group in molecule A, it is C double bond C. This is the next functional group in the molecule A. And if this functional group is present, definitely we had to get something around 1620 and 1680, but that was not there. We had only peaks in this region. We didn't have anything here. So this is ruled out. Again, we have an OH group here. And if it is an OH group, we should be getting a peak. For an alcoholic OH, we should be getting a peak around 3200 to 3600. This is also absent, meaning the C double bond C as well as the OH functional group peaks are not there in the graph. What we have got, both are absent in the graph. We had the peaks only for this and this. Obviously, the only possibility is option B to be the actual compound that is produced as a result of the reaction, not compound A. I'll repeat, because we had the peaks corresponding to only carbonyl and the CH bonds, we can come to the conclusion that molecule B is the actual product what is formed as a result of the reaction, not molecule A. So this is it. Again, so now back to the question. Deduce whether the product is A or B using evidence from the spectra together with sections 26 and 27 of the data booklet. Based on IR spectrum, we have come to the conclusion that it is compound B, but we have, the question is asking us to predict whether it is A or B based on both IR as well as H1 NMR. Both the data has to support that it is compound B itself. So now let's try to analyze whether B itself is the product based on H1 NMR also. So here is the H1 NMR spectrum. Here is the H1 NMR spectrum. Now, in this H1 NMR spectrum is used to identify how the functional groups are connected, or the hydrogen environment, or here is the H1 NMR spectrum. This is the H1 NMR spectrum for the compound. What we have got, it is from IR spectrum, we have already partially come to the conclusion that it is compound B. Now here we are going to reconfirm it with H1 NMR also. Now the NMR spectrum, as probably you would be knowing, it is used to, it will be giving the peaks corresponding to the environment in which a hydrogen atom is existing. This is a low resolution spectrum. So for corresponding to the hydrogen atoms in different environments, we will be getting 1 peak. For a hydrogen environment, for hydrogen atom in CH3 will be giving rise to 1 peak. The hydrogen atoms in CH2 will be giving rise to another peak. Then if there is a hydrogen atom in the OH group, that will be giving rise to another peak. If there is the hydrogen atom in CHO group, that will give rise to yet another peak. And those values have been shown here as chemical shift values. In this graph, if you're seeing, you have a peak at 0. This corresponds to the reference, which is the 0 corresponds to reference, which is TMS, tetramethylsilane. So that is not corresponding to our compound. We need not have to worry about it. Then there is a peak here as well as a peak here. This is beyond 2 or somewhere very close to 2.2. Let's take it as somewhere around 2.2. Then here we have a peak just before 10. So let's take it as about, say, 9.9. So two functional groups, hydrogen in two different environments giving rise to two different peaks. That is the conclusion as of now. Now we have to find out which are the two environments. From the graph, what we got in the IR spectroscopy, we came to the conclusion that there is a presence of a carbonyl group. And if you're analyzing this H1 NMR, we can find that a carbonyl hydrogen, a hydrogen atom in carbonyl environment will be giving rise to 9.4 to 10 peak. See, we are getting somewhere around 9.2, which falls in this particular range. So this is because of the hydrogen that is present in the carbonyl group. This hydrogen is actually giving rise to the 9.9 peak. Okay, so that is confirmed. Now the compound B was having a CH3 group as well. I'll rewrite compound B if you have forgotten it. It is CH3 CHO. This is corresponding to 9.9. Now we have another environment for CH3. There is another hydrogen which is, now there is a hydrogen atom in CH3 environment, a totally different environment. So this also has to give a peak. And if you're again coming back to the data, it is, the CH3 is actually expected between 0.9 to 1, meaning here, if this is somewhere around 1, this is where we are expecting the CH3 group. But it is shifted towards 2 or beyond 2. And that would happen when we have a carbonyl group very close to it. You can see this. When you're having a carbonyl group very close to the hydrogen, that time only it will be going towards 2.2 to 2.7. Understood? I'll repeat again. CH3 is actually expected to be around 0.9 to 1, but that is when there is no carbonyl around it. Because of the presence of a carbonyl group, the CH3 peak, which we are expecting around 0.9 to 1, will be slightly shifted further away, and it will be appearing around 2.2 to 2.7. And yes, here we have the data supporting it. Here it is shown as CH2, but then in this group you can assume it to be hydrogen, so that doesn't affect the result, affect our answer. So here we are having the 2.2, which is corresponding to CH3 group of the molecule. Joining these two, we can again reconfirm that compound B is the compound B is the product that is formed as a result of the reaction. So here we are back at the question. Again, I'm reading it. Deduce whether the product is A or B using the evidence from these spectra together with sections 26 and 27 of the data booklet. 26 is IR spectroscopy data and 27 corresponds to H1 NMR data. So from that only we have come to the conclusion that compound B is the actual product. So first part, identify the product. Identify the product. It is compound B from IR. They are asking only one piece of evidence. So let's say 1750 peak corresponding to carbonyl group. Carbonyl group, which is the aldehyde which is present in this particular molecule. So here is the answer key. 1700, which corresponds to carbonyl, which is present. We were asked to write only one evidence. So we had written only one evidence. They have highlighted that the absence of C double bond C from compound A by saying that a peak is absent around 1620 to 1680. Then they have also indicated the absence of hydroxyl group by saying that there is no peak around 3200 to 3600. It's optional. So this is what we had written. Moving to the next part of the question, one piece of evidence from H1 NMR. So in H1 NMR, there were two peaks at somewhere, one around 2.2 and another one around 9.2, sorry, 9.9, somewhere around 9.9. Now the 2.2 corresponds to the CH2 group or the hydrogen from CH2 group very next to the carbonyl group. Hydrogen next to a carbonyl group. Hydrogen next to the carbonyl group. Carbonyl group. And there was the 9.9 peak which corresponds to the hydrogen from aldehydic CHO functional group. This has a range of, this is in the range of 9.4 to 10. Coming back to H1 NMR, they have indicated that there are two signals. We have also stated it. Then they've indicated the presence of the CHO group somewhere around 9.4 to 10. And they have indicated the peak around 2.2, which corresponds to the CH2, hydrogen from CH2, very next to a carbonyl group. For compound A, they have indicated that there is nothing around 4.5 to 6, which shows that double bond is absent. Both H1 NMR as well as IR spectrum indicates that or clearly confirms that compound B is the actual one, A is absent, or A is not the product or B is the product. It is proved by both IR as well as H1 NMR. Moving to the next question, we are having, this is the next part of the question. Reduce the splitting pattern you would expect for the signals in a high resolution H1 NMR. So in high resolution H1 NMR, what happens is, depending upon the environment, depending upon the neighboring hydrogens, the peak what we are getting will be splitted into doublets, quadrets, triplets and all. We'll see how it happens. This is the low resolution peak. This is the low resolution peak corresponding to compound B. I'll redraw it. It was CH3CHO. Now, there are two environments in it. One is CH3 environment, hydrogen in CH3 environment, and there is also hydrogen in CHO environment, meaning hydrogens in two different environments. So this is environment A and this is environment B. Now, what happens is a hydrogen atom in one particular environment, depending upon its surrounding, will be splitted into quadrets, triplets, doublets, and all. Now, let's see how this happens. For that, we have to depend on the Pascal's triangle. If you know Pascal's triangles, we have one, then one, then we have 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 3, 1, 1, 3 plus 1 is 4, 3 plus 3 is 6, 3 plus 1 is 4, again 1. So this is the way Pascal's triangle goes. Now, how will we identify the splitting pattern from Pascal's triangle? I don't know whether you know this or not. So if there is 0 hydrogen in the neighborhood, 0 hydrogen in the neighborhood, it will be giving rise to a singlet peak. This is a singlet peak. This is a singlet peak, which will be obtained when you have no hydrogen. Singlet corresponding to 0 hydrogen in the neighborhood. So this is called a doublet. You will be getting a doublet when there is 1 hydrogen in the neighborhood. If you're analyzing compound A, you can find that the CH3 is having 1 hydrogen in its neighborhood, which is there in the CHO, which is the hydrogen in CHO part. I'll repeat. Environment A is having a hydrogen in its neighborhood, which is there in the CHO group. So CH3 will be splitted up into a doublet with same peak height. If you want, I'll again repeat it. CH3 is, which is there in environment A. It was this is the one which was corresponding to CH3. Because of its neighbor, because of its neighboring hydrogen, this is it. Because of the neighboring hydrogen, it will be splitted up into a doublet, as we can see here. So this will be splitted up like this. Okay. Next, this will be corresponding to a triplet A, which is CH3. This has 1 hydrogen as its neighbor. One hydrogen as its neighbor. So it will be giving rise to 1 hydrogen will be giving rise to a doublet, as you can see here. This gives rise to a doublet of equal height. A doublet of equal height. Coming to B, this is CHO, hydrogen in CHO. This has 3 hydrogens as its neighbor. Now, coming to CHO, which is here, it is having 3 hydrogen in its neighbor. 3 hydrogens as its neighbor. This is from the CH3. 3 hydrogens are there on CH3. So what will happen when there were 0 neighbors? 1. When there were, this was for 0 neighbors. When the neighboring atom was 1, it was a doublet. When the neighboring atoms were 2, it was a triplet. When the neighboring atoms are 3, it is going to be a quartet. So here we are going to get a quartet in the ratio 1:3:3:1, meaning 1 triple the height, another one of equal height, another one and a small one here. This is 1:3:3:3:1, 3:1, and this will be for the CHO because there are 3 hydrogen in its environment. So this will be splitting into 1:3:3:1. I hope this is clear. If you have any confusion, please have a replay of this particular portion. Back to the question. Reduce the splitting pattern you would expect for the signals in high resolution H1 NMR spectrum. At 2.3, we are getting a doublet. At 2.3, we are getting a doublet. And at 9.8, we are getting a quartet. Okay. Here is the answer key to the question. It's clearly stating 2.3 is for doublet and 9.8 will be corresponding to a quartet. Now let's move on to the next question. Here we have the next question. Product B, CH3CHO, can also be synthesized from ethanol. Ethanol is, probably all of you know it, it is CH3CH2OH. Ethanol is CH3CH2OH. This can be oxidized to ethanol. Suggest the reagents and the conditions required to ensure good yield of product B. Actually, what happens is if you want to convert ethanol, if you want to get ethanol, if you want to convert ethanol to ethanol, what is to be done is it has to be oxidized with potassium dichromate, potassium permanganate. Any of these oxidizing agents will do, but there is a problem in this oxidation. If we don't do this reaction carefully, the oxidizing agent will convert alcohol to aldehydic functional group, but the reaction doesn't stop there. It will further be oxidized to the carboxylic acid, which is ethanoic acid. Here the question is stating we want to stop at aldehydic stage. The question is asking us how can we get aldehyde out of the alcohol, not the carboxylic acid. Meaning the question is asking us the condition and the reagent which will help us stop the reaction at aldehydic stage without proceeding towards the carboxylic acid stage. Now, if you want to understand this method, first we have to, probably some of you might be having a trouble in understanding how this can happen. So let's check the background of it. Let's see the theory part of it. So for that, let's understand the theory part. So this is the experimental setup for distillation, and this is the experimental setup for refluxing. There is a minor difference only which will between distillation and refluxing. If you can observe, there will be the mixture which is taken in a round bottom flask. It is heated. Here also the mixture is taken in a round bottom flask and it is heated. Then you can see a condenser which is having a water inlet, cool water inlet, and a hot water outlet. This also has a cool water inlet and a hot water outlet, meaning both is partially the same. Then what is the difference between distillation and refluxing? In distillation, what is happening is the component will be collected in a separate container, whereas in refluxing that is absent. So now how does it help? How does this arrangement, this difference in the arrangement, help us in our reaction? So in this, if we are taking the mixture, if the ethanol potassium dichromate mixture is taken in the round bottom flask and kept for distillation, what happens is here the ethanol will be oxidized to aldehyde, which is CH3CHO, or ethanol. The alcohol will be oxidized to the aldehyde. This aldehyde is having a lower boiling point than the alcohol. Alcohols are having hydrogen bonding, that will be having a higher boiling point. Aldehydes have dipole-dipole attraction, because of which its boiling point will be lower. And having a lower boiling point in this hot environment, immediately it will be vaporizing off. Now what happens? This hot vapors, what is coming out, we are not allowing it to return back, but this hot vapors are allowed to move through the condenser, where it will be cooled down and it will be getting collected. So if we go for distillation, we will be able to convert the alcoholic functional group to aldehydic functional group. Why? Because the product which is formed is immediately distilled out and collected in another container. So distillation helps us in collecting aldehyde from alcohol through oxidation with a reagent like acidified potassium dichromate. Now, what happens in refluxing? In refluxing, what happens is, like before, the hot vapors are moving up. Of course, that is happening, but this condenser, what is kept here, will cool the vapors down. So what happens? The cold vapors will again drop back to the reaction mixture itself. You can clearly see it here. The droplets are dropping back into the reaction mixture. So what happens? Here there is acidified potassium dichromate. This acidified potassium dichromate will further oxidize it into carboxylic acid. So what happens here? We have the alcohol, which is oxidized to aldehyde, which gets further oxidized to carboxylic acid, meaning refluxing helps an alcoholic OH group to get converted into carboxylic acid. We will not be able to get aldehyde if we choose refluxing. So for our product, if you want to get product B out of ethanol, the best suitable option is distillation. So the reagents required is acidified potassium dichromate, K2Cr2O7. This is the reagent, and the condition required is distillation or refluxing. It is distillation, not refluxing. So now let's check the answer key. So here we have it. The reagent is potassium dichromate under acidified condition. Both are compulsory. We have to write acidified potassium dichromate because the product formed will not be further oxidized. The next question, deduce the average oxidation state of carbon in compound B. So the compound B is CH3CHO. So here we can take carbon as X. We don't know how much it is. Hydrogen is +1, but there are 3 hydrogens. So I'm taking it as +1 times 3. Again, it is carbon. I don't know how much it is. Then there is hydrogen, which is +1 again. Oxygen, which is -2. So I can write X +3 plus X -2. I missed this +1 here. So that +1 is equal to 0. Or I can get 2X plus 3 plus 1 is 4 and -2 will be 2 is equal to 0. I can get X will be equal to this taken to other side becomes -2 by 2 division by 2. So it would be -1. So the oxidation state of carbon is -1. I'll just show you another method also. The compound is CH3CHO. We can write its molecular formula. I think that would be easier, a bit time consuming. So 2 carbons, it would be C2, 4 hydrogens, H4, oxygen. So carbon, we don't know how much it is. 2 of them, X, 2 times X. Hydrogen, it is +1, 4 of them times 4, plus oxygen is -2. Overall charge of the molecule is 0. So we get 2x plus 4 minus 2 is equal to 0. 2x plus 2 is equal to 0, 2x is equal to minus 2, or x will be equal to minus 1. So either ways you can do it, you'll get the same oxidation state for carbon. Moving to the next question, explain why product B is water soluble. Product B is CH3CO and H, and water is this. So what happens is this oxygen can form hydrogen bond with the hydrogens on water molecule. Okay, now the thing is, this is a 3 marks question, meaning we have to have 3 points to it. Simply writing hydrogen bond will not be sufficient. That will give us only 1 mark. So we have to account for 3 points. So let's see what are the 3 points. The oxygen is present, electronegative oxygen is present in the aldehyde, which is capable of forming hydrogen bond. So first one, oxygen is present in compound B, present in B, that can with a lone pair which can form the hydrogen bond. It forms hydrogen bond with water. Then we can also state that this is a permanent dipole, and because of that permanent dipole only, this hydrogen bonding is sufficiently strong. So we can state that B is a permanent dipole. There is one more point which you can be writing in the answer. This is it is having a very short organic chain. Its carbon chain is very short, and carbon chain by default, by nature, is water repelling. In this compound B, the carbon chain is very short, so it does not interfere much in repulsion. It doesn't give rise to a repulsive interaction. So we can state that short carbon chain of B does not give rise to much repulsion. Give rise to much repulsion with water molecule. With water molecules. Previous question, it is -1. We forgot to check that. It is -1. And for this question, there's the presence of oxygen. It can form hydrogen bond. The hydrogen chain is short. It doesn't disrupt hydrogen bonds being formed with water. And there is a large permanent dipole-dipole interaction. So this is all for now. Thank you.